In the last video, Kent Christmas and Lana Vosser offered up some pretty grandiose words. Speaking of grandiose, on December 18th, just 1 week before Christmas, several prophets exchanged their prophetic insight over a Zoom event called Prophetic Dateline. Bill Hamon kicked off the show. Let me say right off the bat, all of us prophets are in agreement. We are on the edge of the greatest move of God that has ever taken place on planet Earth. In the parable of the 5 wise and 5 foolish virgins, the wise virgins didn't just have what they needed, they had more than what they needed. Jesus said, when you see the signs, when you see wars and rumors of wars, take natural precautions. But he also said, this gospel of the kingdom must be demonstrated throughout all the earth. Then the end will come. Just let that sink in for a minute. He said, we are on the edge of the greatest move of God that has ever taken place on planet Earth. Wow. James Goll followed. The day before, I was seeking God for direction on the year 2021 ahead. This morning I was given a crystal clear dream where I was in the streets and there was a dice game being played called craps. I didn't know anything about the game, so I looked up its rules after I awoke, and upon researching, I read about a specific type called street craps, and I woke up hearing the words, roll the dice, I'm going to give you double for your trouble. It felt like for all of the trouble that we had gone through in 2020, we would receive double for our trouble, but that we would have to get out into the streets. It's the roaring 20s. We've got to take risks. It could get worse before it gets better. There'll be riots, sitters, and squatters. But God is going to show up in the streets. God says, roll the dice. Don't play church. Be the church. No more inside the walls. Get outside the walls. I will meet you there. Roll the dice. Play some craps. I will give you double for your trouble. Isaiah 61:7. It's time for the restoration of the roaring 20s. In my last ministry trip, God had me walk to a newsstand whereby I saw a Time magazine cover dedicated to the 100-year commemoration of the Roaring 20s. So I think there's going to be a Holy Spirit movement of truth in the streets that is going to counter the other false movement in the streets. I wonder if what God showed him referred to the pushback by thousands of citizens demanding audits in the 6 swing states deep into 2021. Perhaps he saw the freedom and health conferences that would spring up through the obedience of Clay Clark. Maybe he saw Cheon and other pastors push back against church shutdowns, Rodney Howard-Browne turning his parking lot into a field of dreams, or Mario Murillo taking revival to California. Halfway through 2021, there is no doubt that the church and we the people have begun to hit the streets, whether metaphorically or literally. Joseph Garlington then added this, I feel like we are in a time of Isaiah 26:9. My soul yearns for you in the night. In the morning my spirit longs for you. When your judgments come upon the earth, the people of the world learn righteousness. And it's like we are in a season in which there is multiplied impact of the various things that are taking place in the world. And when I prayed about it, I felt like we were in verse 20 through 21. Go, my people, enter your rooms and shut the doors behind you. Hide yourselves for a little while until his wrath is past. See, the Lord is coming out of his dwelling to punish the people of the earth for their sins. The earth will disclose the blood shed on it. The earth will conceal its slain no longer. I believe that this is the season we are in now. God is saying, let me handle this. And the thing I see in principle is that whenever there is a breakthrough coming, there is an increase of intensity from the enemy because he knows what's coming, and he wants to shut it down. The ecclesia has more power than we understand, but sometimes we don't realize that until we're cornered. As one friend said to me, heroes aren't born, they're cornered. Cindy Jacobs then rounded off the prophetic circle with this. 2 years ago, she said, I started to warn that China was militarizing for war, and that there was going to be something like a Chinese Pearl Harbor, and that could have been related to COVID-19, or it could have been related to the elections. But I believe that more and more will get exposed in relation to China's meddling in the election. Well, if Mike Lindell's documentaries were right, then Cindy hit the tail on that donkey. Also on December 17th, Dutch shared Chuck Pierce's latest insights on day 42 of Give Him 15. He said, Chuck told me a few days ago, the Lord is going to raise up a threefold cord like unto Elisha Jaziel, and Jehu. The Lord told Elijah to anoint those 3 men in the latter part of his ministry in order that they might finish what he started. Doing so is a marriage of civic and spiritual government, a marriage of the prophet and those who sat in government seats. The Lord instructed Elijah to go anoint Elisha to be prophet in his place, and to anoint Jaziel to be king over Syria and Jehu king over Judah. I believe God is restoring this pattern in America, just as it was when he founded her. Even now, during this election, the Lord is anointing apostles and prophets to speak the truth and support those he has placed in government. God combined civic and spiritual government when he established America. Our founders did not espouse today's separation between the two. Biblically, all government is supposed to flow from God's authority, and in fact, our founders' thinking was that it was impossible to rightly govern without him. The founders formed our government based off of Isaiah 33:22. For the Lord is our judge, the judicial branch of government. The Lord is our lawgiver, legislative, and the Lord is our king, executive branch. In our day, God wants to restore the revelation that he is the source of government, and that for government to function properly, it must flow from him. We need individuals in office that will seek his wisdom and guidance, which of course came through at times spiritual leaders. One of the first things individuals aligned with the Biden campaign have said that will have to go is the infiltration of the religious right into government. We are now infiltrators. They want Christianity out of our government, relegated only to our churches. Some don't want it to exist at all. The Antichrist spirit operating through these individuals would love to shut down the church entirely. We cannot let this happen, which is one of the reasons we cannot give up this fight. If Biden wins, there are those controlled by the Jezebel spirit who will come into office immediately. These people hate the fact that President Trump asked for prayer and has appointed many believers to government offices. They hate the fact that there are Christian leaders throughout the administration. They don't understand or simply don't believe that this is a way that God and America's founders intended our government to work. Cindy Jacobs spoke of China. She was not alone. 2 days later, on December 19th, Dutch shared the following dream by Gina Gholston. She said, "In the dream, I was part of a group of 200 to 300 intercessors. I recognized some of the people in the group, but 6 members would play significant roles in the dream. Dutch Sheets, who I understood to represent the apostolic, Chuck Pierce, the prophetic, Jim Hodges, who is Dutch's spiritual father and represents agreement and prayer, Tom Slater, intercession, and 2 men in the military, who I believe represent the law and justice. We had gathered in an auditorium for a specific time of prayer and had been praying and decreeing for quite a long time. Suddenly, I noticed we were standing on old moss-covered steps. Where are we, I thought. Somehow I knew we were in China, standing on the Great Wall. We began walking upstairs to what appeared to be a jungle-like setting, walking shoulder to shoulder for miles up this very steep climb. Finally, we came to a tower-like structure, the first of 4. When we stepped up onto the platform, we saw the Liberty Bell. The 2 soldiers went to pick up the bell, and when they did, they saw that there was a pile of U.S. money under it. The 2 men turned the Liberty Bell upside down and put the money inside. One group then got back into our shoulder-to-shoulder formation and left the tower. We walked for miles up another steep row of steps until we came to a second tower. As before, we stepped up to the platform, but this time there was a MacBook computer lying on the platform. On the screen of the computer were the numbers of the Dow Jones average. Someone picked up the laptop and took it with us as we left the tower. We continued climbing yet another steep incline to the 3rd tower. There was an old, long, very heavy oak church pew. At both ends of the pew was more money, piles of U.S. currency that had been bundled together. In the center of the pew was a Bible, and laid across it was a wooden cross approximately 7 feet tall. Tom and Jim took the Bible, cross, and pew and continued the journey. The final stretch of the climb was steeper than the others. We continued to carry all the items we had found at the other towers. At the 4th tower, we found a small megaphone. Dutch picked it up and took it to Chuck, stating, "You have to do this now." Chuck took the megaphone in his hands, but first said, "I need to get some height." Responding to him, Tom and Jim brought the pew for Chuck to stand on. Then the two soldiers brought over the Liberty Bell and set it straight up in the middle of the pew. Chuck then took the large cross to steady himself as he climbed onto the pew and finally up onto the Liberty Bell, always holding onto the cross to steady himself. As this happened, Gina looked ahead, and the Great Wall of China seemed to stretch forever. In the distance, she could see the Chinese army moving toward us. Urgently, she said to Dutch, "You need to do this now." Chuck then put the megaphone to his mouth and 7 times said, "America shall be saved." Each time he said this phrase, he turned in a different direction, and his voice became more and more adamant. Though he spoke in English, each time it came out of the megaphone in a different language. Just as he had finished the 7th decree, Gina shouted, "They're here!" The Chinese army was not at the tower where we were gathered, but the large pew was blocking them from getting onto the platform with us. I then turned and looked into the right toward the direction we had been walking. "Look!" I screamed. "Hold on! There's a wave coming!" As we looked, the Great Wall was making a wave motion, much like you would see at a ball game when the crowd does the wave. Again, I shouted, "Hold on!" as we all locked arms and bent our knees to brace ourselves. When the massive wave reached us, there was a violent shaking, but we were not shaken. Chuck was still holding onto the cross, standing onto the Liberty Bell, and Dutch was still holding onto Chuck to steady him. Once the wave got past us, it hit the Chinese army, which then flung the army off the wall, and then continued and straightened out the wall. Gina thought of Isaiah 40, line 4 and 5. "Every valley shall be raised up, every mountain and hill made low. The rough ground shall become level, the rugged places a plain, and the glory of the Lord will be revealed, and all people will see it together. For the mouth of the Lord has spoken." Where the path had been crooked and steep, it now leveled out, when suddenly the team was in Washington, D.C. at the U.S. Capitol. There we laid all its items down that we had collected on our journey: the Liberty Bell, the bundles of money, the laptop, the old pew, the megaphone, cross, and Bible. Now, you tell me if that isn't a dream interpreter's dream come true. I mean, can you have a dream more jam-packed with symbolism than that? For the sake of all of you who like to draw your own prophetic interpretations, I'll hold back and just reinforce the key points. First, there was a group of 200 to 300 prayer intercessors gathering for prayer when they found themselves in the Great Wall of China. On the wall, they had to pass through a jungle-type setting, climb a steep terrain, and walk arm in arm. Along their journey, they came upon 3 platforms, all of which required miles of rigorous climbing to reach. For each stage of the journey, they captured different things, almost as if collecting items for a scavenger hunt. On the first, they claimed the Liberty Bell. On the second, a Mac laptop with Dow Jones averages. And on the third, an old church pew, Bible, and rugged cross. Under the first 2, there were bundles of cash. The second also represented money. Chuck Pierce, the prophet, then needed to climb upon the Liberty Bell and hold himself up upon the rugged cross to yell into a megaphone. 7 times he proclaimed, "America shall be saved," just as Elijah prayed for rain 7 times, and Israel marched around Jericho for 7 days. Just as the Chinese army was charging, the wave caused by Chuck's decree took out the army and released God's glory described in Isaiah 40. Finally, the gang saw the crooked road leveled and found themselves suddenly appear at the U.S. Capitol building, where they laid down all the items they collected or recaptured before the dream ended. The recaptured items included the Liberty Bell, representing their freedom, bundles of money, representing what had been stolen, the megaphone, representing their voice or their authority, and the old pew, Bible, cross, representing America's Christian foundations. All right, dream interpreters, go at it. Finally, on December 21st, Dutch shared another dream by Greg Hood, which also consequently landed on December 17th. He said, "In the dream, there was a fight between a lion and a dragon. The dragon came into the ring first. He was the challenger. In the dragon's corner were Chinese men and Arab men, and a man from North Korea with a Russian flag tattooed to his forehead. When the Lion came into the ring, Dutch Sheets, Ken Malone, and Greg were carrying trophies of the Lion's past victories. The fight was a duel to the death. The fight erupted quickly and was very loud. Dutch turned to the VIP section, roped off, and shouted, "Now! Start now!" I saw many of the people accompanying Dutch on the prayer tour with them. They began to prophesy and decree, releasing prophetic insight from their dreams. Everything everyone said, the Lion did. I could see in the dragon's quarter men dressed in old Chinese attire, pulling handles on what appeared to be slot machines, which would give the dragon points for the dragon but didn't affect the fight as they had hoped. The dragon tried to stay away from the Lion as much as possible, and the Lion held off for a moment as though he were offering the dragon mercy, giving him the opportunity to yield. This was even said in the decrees and prophetic words, but the dragon would not. Suddenly, and without warning, the Lion leaped forward with a powerful thrust, caught the dragon by the neck, and ripped its head and neck from its body. Sorry, I probably should have told you this dream was R-rated. Anyway, I continue. The Lion then began to walk toward the White House carrying its head. As the Lion arrived at the White House, Dutch and Greg noticed that every step the Lion made left a paw print shaped as different state flags. There were 50 steps for the Lion, and 50 state flags left behind tracing the steps. Upon reaching the White House, the Lion walked through a set of double doors and went to the Oval Office. President Trump and George Washington were standing and praying facing a painting of the Appeal to Heaven flag. I knew that Washington here related to him as a general, not a president. When the doors opened and we entered, they both turned around. The Lion dropped the dragon's head and neck on the president's desk. The Lion then spoke to Trump. "Sign it. Make it official." Then turning to Dutch, he said, "You sign it too. I never want this dragon to live again." President Trump said, "Does anyone have a pen?" George Washington then responded, "Here, use mine. This is the pen I took from Cornwallis at his surrender." Wow, anyone shaking their heads in amazement? I told you, Dutch has his own team of prophetic dreamers. Do you notice how we have 2 dreams and a word from Cindy Jacobs, all about China within essentially a 24-hour period? Amazing. Which I suppose might beg the question, why does God need to give his prophets and anointed sleepers so many dreams, so many prophetic words? And why does he need to speak through puzzles and endless games? The simple answer is, he doesn't need to. He wants to. Proverbs says, "It is the glory of God to conceal a matter, the glory of kings to seek it out." In short, God delights in taking us on spiritual scavenger hunts and then asking us to go on a prophetic and prayerful journey with him and with one another. His ways may seem strange to us, but scriptures do say, as high as the heavens are above the earth, so much higher are his ways than ours. Soon, we will get a glimpse of just how high those thoughts really are. Please join us for video number 14, Righteousness and Justice Shall Kiss.